Ashimmu used to be one of my favorite boats in the game. Back a couple years ago, I primarily used it for solo PvP. I was roaming around in low sec and I used the ship in null sec as well. It remains one of my most successful ships and it is one of the only cruisers that I own that remain undefeated to this day. Now, with the introduction of stabs and with the introduction of the one-click escape cores, the Ashimmu has lost its solo capabilities. Nowadays, the Blood Raider ships are primarily used as support ships in a fleet. The trade description of the Ashimmu remains the same. It is still the good old Blood Raider vampire that we all know. It has a fantastic bonus on Nosferatus and Neutral Raiders, as well as a fantastic bonus on Webifer range. And I think with these stats, the Ashimmu can still perform really well, but in a fleet, for solo you have to sacrifice a lot of medium slots for a lot of points, which might affect the EWAR capability of this ship. The Ashimmu can be a shield or armor tank, and it has a fantastic capacitor, but the Ashimmu is one of the slowest cruisers, and I have to mention its power grid is huge. You can fit a lot of large modules on this ship. Now, with the introduction of the new skills, the Ashimmu's lasers have been improved. With some of the skills, with the controlled burst skills, you can reduce the capacitor usage of the turrets, which will improve the capacitor runtime not only on the Ashimmu, but it also affects the railguns as well. So yeah, overall the Ashimmu did receive a indirect buff with the new skills. Now this is my classic PvP build that I used on this ship a long time ago. This is a kite build with dual webs. One Nosferatu, one large Nosferatu, and one Disruptor. One drone that's just sitting there, although the drone is basically useless, but I used the drone for a couple of tricks that still work. Dual adaptives, one large booster, and one afterburner. Now, I had A types for some reason. Let me go back and swap the modules to C types to be a bit more normal, although my old Ashimmu did have A types and B types at one point, which is funny because I used that ship in PvP and I was very happy with the Ashimmu. Again, I had so much fun with it. One of the most fun PvP ships to date. I would fight battleships 1v1 with it and I would win because that's just how good this ship used to be. Okay, now I have C types. The DPS is 509, which is fine. Not a big deal after all. The goal with the Ashimmu is to outlast your targets and to slowly kill them. And in that aspect, the Ashimmu is, well, at least used to be, quite good. Okay, now I have now I have a more normal build installed. As for the nanocore, in this video I will fly the Ashimmu without a nanocore, but you have a lot of options. My Ashimmu used to have the tungsten nanocore, which is the blue one, and I would recommend, if you don't want to spend a lot of ISK on the nanocore, then the blue one is definitely the way to go. And you can also use the Concord Pass nanocore, should work real well as well. But in most cases I used to run this ship with the tungsten H core and I loved it. It was such a good ship. Now on to the rigs. I will show the more expensive version and the cheap version. Now this is basically the build that my old Ashimmu used to have, the exact replica. And I focused on shield resistance and shield boost performance. Basically I improved the shield boost amount while I also reduced the capacitor usage of the booster, and I also increased I reduced the cycle of the booster so that it can boost faster. Overall, a very interesting combination that used to work really well. Now the integrations, The integrations were a bit overkill, but back then I had a lot of power grid issues with the ship, so I had to do something about that. But nowadays that's not necessary, and I'll show you the cheap option as well. Now for the implants, you have the pulse crystal, which is also called the blood raider implant, because the implant does improve your DPS, does improve the damage output, but it does increase the power usage of your lasers. Capacitor and, well, power usage is not a big problem with the blood raider ships. After all, they have the best capacitors and they have the best electronic warfare capabilities. Basically, their capacitor is constantly stable all the time, so you can easily use this implant. And the one, I guess, drawback is that if you have the implant on 45, then you might be killing your own ship with the secondary. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. But it's kind of funny with this ship because technically you can use it, but it's going to be a hilarious and awkward awkward way of using it, because you will be killing your own shield to get capacitor back, but you also have a perfect stable capacitor with the Nosferatu, but at the same time you also maintain the capacitor with the Nosferatu and shield, and you maintain the shield with the shield booster. Somehow this contraption ends up being stable in all fronts, and I'll show you what I'm talking about when I click on the level 45 attribute of the implant. And here you can take a look at the stats of the booster, you can take a look at the stats of the Nosferatu. Overall, a fantastic performance. Really, kind of really scary actually when you think about it. 1075.09 DPS when the implant is active, and you can also use that secondary, which will now kill my own shield, but I am a shield tank, so your implants will take shield hit points and enemy turrets will also do damage on your shield, but technically your shield booster should be able to withstand both. So you have a stable shield and a stable capacitor, and you have a stable DPS output. Basically everything is super stable, and it's kind of funny how this works. And I wouldn't recommend that you use the implant on a shield tank. I'm just showing you that for some reason, somehow it actually works really well. And yeah, the capacitor is stable and the shield is stable as well, with everything running all the time. So basically, as long as your target has capacitor, you will also have shield and capacitor. I don't know, a little bit weird, but yeah. Now you can also use the same build with pulse ladders. They have shorter range but much better tracking speed, and they have a bit better DPS. Now my Ashimmu mostly used beam ladders with dual webs. My Ashimmu used to be a kite, but I also do have a couple builds that I used with the pulse ladders on the Ashimmu, and overall they worked really well. But I always preferred to use beam ladders in PvP because of the extra range, and because I already had like 30-kilometer webs, I wanted to take advantage of the long range webs. 1309.50 DPS with the pulse ladders, which honestly is pretty good. Quite happy with the DPS output on the Ashimmu. You can also use a micro warp drive. However, a micro warp drive will take an impact on your capacitor. Now, since this is a blood raider, the capacitor performance is not going to be an issue, so you can use a micro warp drive. But on the Ashimmu, I used to prefer an afterburner over a micro warp drive, especially when I was fighting battleships. Against battlecruisers and battleships, I preferred to use a afterburner. Against smaller ships, cruisers, frigates, I prefer to use a micro warp drive. That's basically how I used to fly the ship, and I have to admit, was highly successful.
Docking request.
I mean, no wonder that my Ashimmu remains basically undefeated. Now you can do a build like this with one adaptive and one damage roll, and I'm afterburner or micro wardrive, depending on the situation. The damage roll is good because it can help you against high burst implants like the barrage implant, high power coil, and some of the other nasty DPS implants. You should still have some very nice shield resistance even with one adaptive. 70, 72, 74, and 74, 7,000 hit points, 70,000 hit points, which, you know, pretty good. And with the damage roll, 28,000 hit points, 90 and 91% resistance, and this should withstand a drone bomb implant or a barrage implant, or, you know, nasty things like that. One of the ways how to deal with that. And now, as promised, let me show you a cheaper option out with the integrations. After all, I kinda stopped using them nowadays. Nowadays, most of my ships don't have integrations. Only the Revelation has them at the moment. And I actually plan to pull them out of that ship, but I'm not really sure when I will do it. But yeah, my Revelation will have the integrations pulled out probably very soon. Now for the shield tank, one EM reinforcer to cover the EM hole. Now I have about 40% EM. Next one is going to be thermal to cover the thermal hole, and now I have 40, 52, 40, and 55, which, you know, is pretty good already. And in the third slot, you can pick a defense operational solidifiers to improve the shield boost performance, or you can also further improve the shield resistance. The third rig can be basically any rig that you think will work the best for you. I picked that one to improve the activation time of the shield booster. Now in the engineering rigs, if you plan to use a capacitor, if you plan to use a power grid heavy build, the ancillary power grid is definitely going to be very helpful. And now I have the large Nosferatu online, and you can enhance the ship's capacitor, you can enhance the ship's speed. You basically have a lot of different fitting options for this ship, but in my case I prefer to improve the power grid and capacitor to make this ship last as long as possible. Now you can also do something like this with Afterburn, and now let me undock and let me show you the performance of this current build. The difference is going to be mainly in the shield booster performance. The shield booster is going to be performing a little bit less because I removed those integrations, but the overall general performance is going to be about the same, so it's not going to give you any problems whatsoever. And again, pretty happy with the outcome and pretty happy with the result. Okay, now on to the armor tank. Dual armor repairs and one adaptive. Now with the armor build, obviously I have to change the rigs into armor rigs, and here I will cover the resistance holes, which means there goes one anti-explosive. The next one will be anti-kinetic, I believe. And the third one is... well, the third one can be anti-thermal, but you can also enhance the armor repair performance, so you have a lot of options here as well. I'll just go and I will cover the anti-thermal. So that's okay. This looks nice. 50, 61, 55, and 51% resistance. Excellent. Now let me undock, and actually no, let me go and change the implant. So with the armor tank, you can go with the pulse crystal or focus crystal for DPS, but you can also do a thermal circulation build. Now with the thermal circulation, you can enhance your armor resistance even more. Basically, the level 15 secondary is working like another adaptive hardener, basically a passive adaptive hardener that's working all the time. And I believe the Ashimmu does need that on armor because you have 4 low slots, and I will show you a lot of different builds, but dual armor repairs seem to be the ideal for the Ashimmu, and it's capacitor stable, very stable actually. Alright, let's undock and let me show you the active stats of the armor tank build. Now I still prefer the shield tank Ashimmu because of the large booster, and the armor repairs do use less capacitor, but they are also power grid heavy. Okay, well, 77,000 hit points, 72, 78, 75 and 73, 5.45 seconds, and they repair about 1268 armor every cycle. It is capacitor stable, and this is surprisingly tanky. Now, not the same tank as with the shields, but it does repair about the same. However, this is only with the thermal circulation implant that gives you extra resistance. Now you can do a build like this with dual adaptives and 1 large repair. I wasn't able to use a C-type. Now the dual medium armor repairs repair a little bit more than 1 large, but with this build you should have a bit more resistance. So you trade less repair for more resistance on the Ashimmu. If you go armor, I will still prefer dual armor repairs, but the ship might feel a bit paper. But it can offer some very interesting advantages over the shield. 96,000 hit points, 79, 84, 81 and 80%. Now this is pretty good. I like the tank on this. It is quite tanky, and it's also capacitor stable. 96,000 hit points on the Ashimmu. Really good. Although the armor repair definitely needs some boost, but you know, it should do its job. And now the PvE build. Now I will do something like this: dual heatsinks, 1 armor repair and 1 afterburner. And the rigs will be laser burst adapters. This is a high sec only build. Don't use a build like this in low sec, it's not going to end well. And for this build you can use the pulse crystal or focus crystal. Now you can use the pulse crystal in PvP as well. It's primarily used in PvP. But you can also use the focus crystal. The focus crystal is player's favorite for PvE. And well, let me show you the DPS with the pulse crystal first, and then I will show the DPS with the focused one.
Undocking.
The pulse crystal does give you immediate DPS, but it is not as high as the DPS that you get on the focus crystal. The pulse crystal gives you basically a lot of DPS upon 1 click, 2.3 thousand with implant active, with 1 heatsink 2.9 thousand, and with the second heatsink 3425.12 DPS, which honestly is pretty solid for the Ashimmu. It does have a lot of very nice DPS. Very interesting. Alright, and now let me
Undocking.
go and let me do the... Oh, I
Destination
forgot
reached.
to hold a second. I forgot to take the focus crystal implant. Now, since they changed the focus crystal, basically it was nerfed. I have to
Docking.
go and shoot at a live target in order to get the full effect, and well, that's what I'm about to do here. The focus crystal has been nerfed with time. I mean, like significantly nerfed, and it will be nerfed even more. Although the drone bombs need to get nerfed as well, if you ask me, but we will see what will happen with that. So, I have activated the implants, and it's okay, 18 km, I'll orbit at 17, which is the optimal range of the Ashimmu. Basically, it can orbit outside of the web range of other ships. Now, I mentioned that the Ashimmu is slow. It's one of the slowest faction cruisers. Although not the slowest is the Stratios. That thing is basically a brick. The Stratios with an afterburner goes 600 meters per second, the Ashimmu goes 800. And with the nanocore, you can focus on extra DPS or extra speed. In my case, most of the tungsten cores that I had for this ship were focused on speed. The DPS isn't that important for PvP with the Ashimmu, because the goal was that you outlast the target, and basically it means a slow death for the target. But nowadays, with the all different implants and one quick escape and all cores, that is a bit more difficult to achieve. But the Ashimmu still is a fantastic ship for a fleet, a fantastic support ship to be more accurate, so it still has a lot of different purposes. Same can be said about the Cruer, same can be said about the Balgor. 3909.02 DPS, just like 0.98 DPS shy of 4000 DPS with the Ashimmu. Well, you know, it's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that DPS output. Well, we can say it's about 4000. If I had just a different build, just a little different build, the DPS would be well over 4000. But for a cruiser, that is some fantastic DPS, and that DPS is pretty much sustained, which makes the Ashimmu a good candidate for high-sec PvE.
We're under attack.
I think the Ashimmu might have the highest cruiser DPS,
Shield damaged.
although I'm not really sure. I'm not counting the Cinnamon with the barrage implant, because that's not sustained. And besides that, we also have the drone bomb. I think the Phantasm might get close to this, but so far I am pretty happy with the laser performance of this boat. It does work really well. And you also have a stable capacitor. Basically, the optimal range of Nosferatu is about 19 kilometers. I'm orbiting at 17, which is almost perfect. So the capacitor will be maintained very easily. The long range webs help at slowing down the smaller ships, which means in return you don't have to worry about missing any targets. And the extra tracking from the skills also does help a lot with the small web targets, so the focus crystal has a bit less chances of missing and resetting the DPS. Now I have the implant on 45, which, you know, is obvious. And if you have the implant on 45, then it might be charged a little bit slowly, but in the end the maximum DPS shouldn't be that much more different. And the last wave, you know, the Ashimmu is still very fun to fly a ship. And I'm very sad that I can't use the ship for a solo PvP anymore. Was literally my favorite solo PvP ship. Was so fun to fly with it in nullsec. There wasn't a ship that I wasn't able to kill with it. It was so much fun, and I'm very glad that I had the chance to experience the Ashimmu in its full glory. Because nowadays the Ashimmu is, well, like I mentioned before, not really a solo ship anymore, because it doesn't have enough points to hold anything. And if you give the ship a lot of points, then it's going to lack in Eivor, and an Ashimmu with 3 or 4 scramblers is a wasted Ashimmu, because the ship is basically designed to be used with Nosferatus and webs, because it doesn't have a lot of wall slots, so you can't really do a lot of DPS, or you can't make it very tanky. You can give it some DPS, you can give it some tank, and in most cases that tank and DPS is going to be more than acceptable, but it is not the same as with the other faction cruisers. And because of that, the Ashimmu really needs to have webs and Nosferatus or neutralizers in order to get the most out of this ship. And well, since we all know that we have a lot of stabs nowadays, it's very easy to avoid the Ashimmu, and that's why the Ashimmu isn't as popular as it used to be. One of the reasons why more and more players stop flying this ship. But again, in a fleet, in an Ashimmu fleet for example, they can be very lethal, and they do work really well if you do fly them in a fleet. So that's their current purpose at the moment, until they change stabs, or until they change how these stupid one-click escape nanocores work. Until then, the Ashimmu will be mostly limited to fleet PvP. However, you might get some ships solo. I mean, not everyone has stabs, but the chances to get a non-stab ship nowadays is very slim. I mean, even a Caracal Navy has like 6 stabs, so you need like 2 scrubbers to hold a Caracal. And yeah, I had a Caracal escape like yesterday. Wasn't able to hold it with a scrambler, they warped out. So yeah, everything is stabbed, and stabs did affect a lot of ships that used to be extremely good and extremely fun. That includes the Ashimmu. Well, how did the Ashimmu perform? It performed really well. The DPS is on point, the tank is on point, and the ship itself did feel very fun. I don't know, perhaps I might return to the Ashimmu at one point. I mean, it's still a fun ship to fly, but my purpose of having the Ashimmu was solo PvP, and with the Ashimmu I mostly did solo PvP, and I don't see, I mean, if I can do that with this ship, then I don't really see much use for it. I mean, I also use it in a fleet, but I had most fun with the Ashimmu when I was in low-sec solo, or when I was in null-sec running around finding and looking for targets. That's basically where I had the most fun with this ship. But with that being said, hope that you guys enjoyed. If you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.